Well, good morning, listeners. My name is Tom Romito, and I am a board member of the Friends of Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, and I'm sporting the brand, as is my co-host, Tajinder Singha. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit celebrating our 25th year, supporting Ohio's only National Wildlife Refuge complex with youth development, public use projects, and most recently, land acquisition and restoration. We are located on the southern shore of Lake Erie near Oak Harbor in some of the most critical wetland habitats in the world. If you're interested in learning more about us and what we do, we're going to add a link to the chat box in just a moment. This link will point you in the right direction to become a member, make a tax-deductible donation to support our work, or even shop at our online nature store. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Lewis, who is the Visitor Services Manager at the Refuge. And she has graciously joined us today to share her program, which is called Understanding Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. Rebecca has been an employee at the Refuge for many years and she probably knows more about the Refuge than anybody I know. So you're going to be delighted with her knowledge of the Refuge in sharing how she greets visitors, how we do programs, how she keeps our volunteers, interns, and staff safe. So before we begin, you'll note that you are muted to minimize background noise for our presenter. What we'd like you to do as you would go is place questions in the chat box, and we will have time maybe during and after the program. Rebecca, what are your druthers? Would you like me to interject questions that we see in the chat box as we go, or would you like to hold them until the end?
As we go is great. I'll also, as I switch subjects, I'll stop for a few minutes to see if anybody has anything that.
Okay, real fine. So folks, there you go. You'll know that we'll be able to answer your questions while Rebecca is still on the subject, rather than having to wait until the end and then go back and so forth. Okay. Rebecca, without any further ado, I turn this over to you so you can share your screen.
All right, there we go. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join us. I'm sure there's going to be more people who are joining later once it's recorded, because it's not a terrible day out there. A little cloudy, but it's going to be kind of warm. So thank you everyone who is joining whenever you're joining. So I prepared about half of our time is going to be a prepared show about some of the things that are here at the Refuge, and then the rest will be up to you. I'll answer your questions. As Tom said, I've been here forever, so I know a few things, and people still manage to stump me. So if we need to, I can get back with you about some of your questions that you might have if I can't answer them. There we go. So who is Ranger Rebecca? I'm the Visitor Services Specialist, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Resource Management from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I grew up in Wisconsin, very near Stevens Point. I've worked for the U.S. Forest Service and now 30 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service. 26 of those years have been here at Ottawa. When I was told I had the job here in Ohio, I'm like, all right, Ohio, never been there, don't know anything about it. I'll, put in my 3 years or so and then head somewhere else. And clearly that didn't happen. And it wasn't, it was completely my choice. It's not like I couldn't get out of Ohio. I have really, really grown to love this refuge, the area, raised my family here, and just very happy to be a part of this refuge. And if
Rebecca,
Yeah.
allow me to interject a comment. One of the participants has asked that you raise your volume. Can you do that, please?
I can.
Okay, swell, thank you.
I honestly don't know where the microphone is on this, so I'll talk a little louder too.
Okay.
Where was I?
Sorry.
No, that was fine. So I often say, if this job were what it was when I started, I would have been bored years ago and would have, been happy to move on. But the job has grown so much. Anyone who's been in the area for longer than 15 years knows that the visitor center added so much to the refuge, but also to this job. So it's just been an exciting, ongoing, changing, growing adventure. And we are using COVID as an opportunity to revamp a lot of our programming. So we are wide open to suggestions, to requests, to changes. We haven't done any public programming in 2 years. So we still have some partnerships that are active, and we still have some groups that are coming, but by all means, if you have an idea, let us know. So we'll happily entertain those. Some of the other things I do besides the work that you see publicly here in the Visitor Center is I'm the coordinator for the State Junior Duck Stamp Contest. We just finished that up last month, and the national winner was chosen last week. I'm the volunteer coordinator. I do all the Visitor Center management, and since the position of Visitor Services Manager is empty and I'm performing as many of those duties as I can, I am also get to be the liaison to the Friends of Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. So what is a National Wildlife Refuge? It's just, each refuge is one small part of a national network of lands. And some refuges have very specific purposes. There is the Mississippi Sandhill Crane Refuge, and their entire purpose is to increase and manage for the population of the Mississippi Sandhill cranes. Other refuges are a little more general, and we are a resting and refueling location for migratory waterfowl. It's our specific purpose, but we also are a location to protect other migratory birds and provide a place for people to come in and see those and enjoy them. Whenever we make a decision about a use on the refuge, wildlife has to be the first consideration that we take. Some places, for instance, if it's more of a national park, people have a higher priority in the decision making. But there are 6 priority uses that, where they're appropriate and compatible with the refuge purposes, that are given precedence. And those are photography, education, interpretation, which is the most simple definition for interpretation, is connecting people to nature. It's just out and enjoying it, explaining it, making sure people understand what they're seeing and experiencing, and forming those connections. Wildlife observation and hunting and fishing. And that, the hunting really throws a lot of people off. The word refuge often is synonymous for some with a sanctuary, a place where everything is protected, but we can't forget, we are a national wildlife refuge, and that has a definition of its own that is different from the dictionary definition of refuge. And I know people are morally opposed to hunting, and I'm never going to try to argue with people about that. I put it at the end as one of the topics I'm always willing to talk about, but I can't go against what, this is what we are. I can't fight who and what the National Wildlife Refuge system is. So this is Ottawa, and some of you may know we are a complex of 3 refuges, Cedar Point and West Sister, and then we also have a lot of satellite refuges. So I can definitely answer questions about those 2, but mainly I'm going to use this image as kind of an explanation of some of the things we have going on here. If you want oriented, right here is our visitor center. The yellow is hiking trails. The red are refuge roads. And by that, it means they're drivable by, let's say, more hardy vehicles. They are not necessarily the wildlife drive. They're just areas that refuge equipment can travel on, and they're in a good enough condition for that most of the time. A pretty common question, what's a pool and what's an MS? And these 2 designations fill us with regret. 20-ish years ago, we worked on a management plan for the whole refuge. It was called the Comprehensive Conservation Plan. And that is when we should have taken the opportunity to change the names so that they have more meaning, so that they don't just confuse people. They're simply management designations. The numbers have to do with where things are. If you, backspace takes me back here. They're sort of in an order. You can see up here on the interior of the refuge, we have MS3, MS4, MS5, and then 6 is down here, but then, yeah, 7, 8. So they're sort of in order. It has simply, it's a designation, so we know when we're sitting in a meeting here in the building what we're talking about, and everybody is talking about the same location. So they mean virtually nothing to the outside world, but we did, at least when we printed our last map, we put these on it so that when people are out on the refuge, they can say, I saw a great horned owl in pool 3. And then we also added road names, which has been tremendously helpful for helping people figure out where they are. It's just, it's something we needed to do quite a while ago. And of course, internally, we use some other phrasings and languages and things that kind of just cause more complications, but we try not to mess everyone else up with that. So what are they? A pool is, it's simply about water management, and a pool is something we leave deeper. We keep water on it longer. It tends to have vegetation, less emergent vegetation, a lot more submergent, which just means it's all growing underneath the water. Maybe some lilies like in this one. This one is actually, I'm trying to remember which one I put in here, but I think this is the Cedar Point Refuge, which is a 2,000 acre wetland. So it's huge. We clearly can't be constantly moving the water levels up and down on that one. So it is certainly managed as a pool. MS stands for moist soil. And this is a type of wetland management where we drain it more often. We manage for moist soil plants, which are early successional plants. They're the ones that come in when ground is first disturbed. They produce a lot of seeds, and their whole job in their short little life is to produce as many seeds so that they can outcompete the plants that come in later. Well, when we reflood those places, the seeds from those plants tend to be right near the water level. and it's just a buffet for ducks when they come back south in the fall. And that is really what moist soil management is all about. It's sometimes we take advantage of the water levels being down, and we might disc up some areas. We might go in and attempt to remove invasive plants or maybe woody vegetation if it's in a location where we don't want that. Maybe we do some work on the dikes that control the water. So there's a lot of, sometimes the water level is decided because maintenance needs to be done. Sometimes it's time to drain the moist soil unit, and we coordinate the maintenance with that time. We also attempt to time it for spring shorebird migration and even fall shorebird migration. So it's not just all about the duck management. A fall drawdown is a little more complicated than a spring, just because we need to get it flooded back up in a shorter amount of time. But we do try to always have something available for those fall shorebirds. So water level management, when you're on the refuge, almost everything you're looking at is connected to water level management. When you're driving on the roads, you're driving on dikes, and alongside roads are either wetlands or ditches, and then you'll see structures and things that I'm sure you are aware have something to do with our management, but how they work, what they do, can be a little confusing. And we seem to have almost no two that are exactly alike, because they've been put in over the whole history of the refuge, and some predate the refuge even. But water level management is not just raising and lowering the water. It's also, those dikes that we're driving on are some of the most important parts of the refuge. There are dikes that keep the water from flooding homes and houses and highways. And they're very important, not just to our water level management, but to the whole physical makeup of this area. So in order to maintain those dikes, we have to make sure the muskrat population is at the perfect level. Too many muskrats and they will use up all the cattails in the wetlands, which we like that they're there using cattails because that opens up water for waterfowl to land in the marshes and have that open water areas. Too many and they will dig their homes in the sides of the dikes, and then that creates a hole, water erodes that area, and then we lose our dike and our water control. It also can be dangerous if equipment falls in the hole. We need to keep the trees off the dikes. Water will follow the roots of the trees into the dike, and then we have erosion. There's physical maintenance. Sometimes just things happen. We had a dike the other day. They drove a roller over as they were prepping for the wildlife drive, and an old culvert that predated refuge management, so nobody knew it was even there, was under the dike and it collapsed. So there's now it's a small but very deep hole right in the middle of the dike. So that will need to be fixed. And in order to do that, they're going to have to dig it all up and fill it in. And we replaced a bunch of water control structures over the last year. Sometimes we just need to repair rock. It got moved by ice in the winter, or we did have some trees and they fell, things like that. And then the mowing. Mowing not only keeps the grasses short so that when our equipment drives on it, we don't get grass seeds in the radiators. It doesn't cause fires. It also keeps the woody vegetation down so that we don't have the other problems that come along later. Water level management is also invasive species management. We have so many invasive plants that have come into our wetlands that every time we do a drawdown, we have to consider, okay, how much time it's going to take to remove the purple loosestrife from that area because it's going to come back in. New plants that are coming in. We just found a new one on the refuge, but it was more in the wooded areas. So, but you know, almost every year we're finding something different and something new that has come into the refuge, and some really cause problems with the water or the wetland habitat. Some are just nuisances in other places, but flowering rush, purple loosestrife, Phragmites, reed canary grass are all some big ones that we battle within the wetlands. And then, as I mentioned before, we also try to time the water level management for migrations of different birds, different species, and some of our other projects that are going on. So when you're on the refuge, you likely have seen these, but probably only about the top foot or two. And this is a water control structure that they put in usually on a dike. And underneath the ground, what you can't see is that there's a culvert on each side. And then down inside is a track with plastic boards on it. And these are called stop logs. And we can set these boards to the height that we want the water on the wetland side. And hopefully this helps make more sense out of that. So you set the boards, that's what's right here. And then the water has to get as high as those boards before it flows over and out the pipe on the other side. So, I mean, it's the same philosophy as if we could physically see a dam, that is what it is. You set the height and the water builds up behind it until it reaches that height, and then it flows over the top. And then some of the other things that are in this picture, you can put a collar around your pipe because sometimes, water does find the largest spaces and the easiest place to flow. So that collar will keep water from eroding around your pipe. And then a rat guard will keep the muskrats and things from going in and plugging it up. Or in the case here, sometimes we have beaver that like to do that too. You'll also see things like this. And this was a pretty fun year for us here on the refuge. We replaced some huge water control structures thanks to H2 Ohio funding. And we see these things and it's like, okay, we got to see what actually was underneath the ground as they were putting these in. And inside that tube is a stop log structure, just like in that much smaller one. But this one, is for a huge wetland, so it's much larger. And then the other end has this on it. And what this does is that wheel on the top, or sometimes it's a crank, and when they turn that, it makes this screw go up or down. And on the bottom of that is a gate that covers the culvert, so we can block off all water. The reason there are two is because we can block the water from either side. So we can keep any water from flowing out, we can keep any water from flowing in, and it just provides the best possible options for any type of water management that we want to do. Sometimes we have something called a flap gate, which controls water. It keeps it from flowing out, but if there's high water, if the water on the other side is higher, it will push the gate open and water can just flow in. So it has a lot less control, but sometimes that's all we need. So we've also added a couple of very, very large water control structures to some areas on the refuge. And these were part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And really, from the time the refuge started, from when it was farmland and hunt clubs and things, it was a battle about keeping the lake out. We wanted the lake there when we needed water to raise the water levels, when we needed something, but it was about battling the lake. And everyone has come to realize that that isn't the best method. And we need to bring that connection back to the lake. It's these wetlands that being connected and the water flowing through the wetlands cleans up the lake. It helps to filter out all of the pollutants and extra nutrients. It provides a place for fish to come in and spawn. And I always point, when we're out at the creek, I point to kids and I'm like, okay, if you are a mother fish, would you rather have your young fish growing up in there where there's lots of plants to hide in and around and things to eat, or out there in that wide open spot without a bit of cover? So the answer is obvious. And we have put some of these in and had sampling done, and they've put sonar units in to see what is going in and out. And the fish passing in and out of these wetlands is just amazing. And so much variety, and it's being used for very good uses. So that's been exciting. And even though they're huge, they're really not different from any of our other units. It's still screw gate and stop log structures and just water moving in and out. It's just giving it that opportunity. We do have one at Cedar Point that they've rerouted a ditch that drains from south of the refuge. It no longer goes straight into the lake. It now goes into the wetland, so that all the stuff from people's yards and all the other nutrients that are coming off fields and pastures and things is going into the wetland. And it sounds like, why in the world would you want all those things in your wetland? But these plants can use all of that. And it's much better for it to be used up in there than out in the lake to grow algae and other things. We do have a couple of these structures which do have one special feature added because the difference in elevation is so extreme. They have a fish ladder so that fish can, some they can just swim back and forth, but some the elevation is quite different. So we've put in a fish ladder so that they can move up into the wetland to spawn and then go back out into the creek. So I think this is the end of my explanation of water control structures and water management. Does anybody have any questions?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question for Rebecca and you haven't put it in the chat room, simply press your space bar and you can speak to Rebecca. She'll hear you. Rebecca, I guess I do have a question about your water control structures. I believe there are several within the refuge complex, which extends from Port Clinton to Cedar Point. Could you identify where those are that purify the agricultural runoff going into through the wetlands?
Sure. I think I'm starting at the east and heading west in my mind here. There's one south of the refuge down on the Little Portage River. We're adding some more along the Portage River on the south side of the Portage River, south of Oak Harbor. We have one just southwest of Davis-Besse, the nuclear power station. It is on the Toussaint River. That is one that has a fish ladder. We are putting one in at Navarre Marsh, which is the marsh property that we manage, but is owned by Davis-Spessy Nuclear Power Plant. And there are 3 here on Ottawa, 1 at Cedar Point. I think that's it.
Rebecca, Kim, a participant, has noted that it's crazy that all those fertilizers from the farmlands are good for the marsh. Could you touch on that point?
Yes. The only reason that it's good is because we have so many plants in the marsh that can absorb it. They're going to make plants grow. So if it's in the lake, it's going to make algae grow, some of the other plants, but it is ridiculous that we would think that we would want something that we would never want in our water system, in our wetlands. But it's simply because what we're trying to take out is fertilizer, and those plants can handle it.
Great, thank you.
There we go. Okay, so who does all of this work? We have a staff of, when we are fully staffed, 10 full-time people and 1 part-time position. And many of you have a chance to get to know Jason Lewis. We're not related, it's sheer coincidence. He's our refuge manager, and just every one of these people is an outstanding person to work with. Carl Fleming just came here in the last couple of years, and Scott Bryant is relatively new, our admin. He's the one who keeps us all running, pays our bills, does all of that. Our refuge biologist has been here almost as long as I have, and he does the work of 5 people. Most everyone here is just working more than just what you would think. You would think a refuge biologist would, be out doing research and studies and things, but he's out every day working those water control structures, making decisions about water level management. Our private lands biologist, this is one of my favorite jobs in the Fish and Wildlife Service. They work with landowners in the area to restore habitat on their property. And he has done some very interesting work with farmers in the area. Sometimes it's people who are getting out of farming and they want to turn their property into wetlands and upland. So he'll be planting like some prairie and things. Sometimes there's trees that are planted. But he's also worked with some farmers in the area where they have maybe one side of their field is just always wet and flooded and it's a little low. So he's actually put in drain tile that will drain the higher parts of their field more effectively and drain into a wetland. And then that wetland can help filter out all of that stuff from the farm field before it goes into the water stream and into a river and such. There's one of those right on, it's on the Toussaint River on Route 19, just north of Oak Harbor, if anybody wants to see that one, see what one looks like. There's also some properties just west of the refuge that are beautiful. There's one, Henry Marsh, right on Krause Road, which is connected to the refuge. And a lot of people assumed when it first went in that it was just more, refuge work, and it's not. It's a completely privately owned wetland. And that's all work done by not only Jeff here at the refuge, but the Division of Wildlife has a private lands biologist. The Ottawa Soil and Water District has some staff people that work on those. They all partner together. They join funding together. They work to find different places to get this funding. and put these amazing restorations in. So that's some great work that they're doing. Our visitor services manager position is empty right now. I'm the specialist, and we have a refuge officer. And then our maintenance team, our permanent full-time people are Chuck Shire and Ramsey House. But then we have 3 maintenance positions right now that are funded through the Great American Outdoors Act. And they are here to work on deferred maintenance, which means projects that we just haven't had the time, the money, the people to put towards. And they spend 50% of their time working at other refuges, working on their projects in those places. So they are really seeing a lot of our region here. Buck Buchanan is on the maintenance team, but he's the one who takes care of all of the things in the building. We regularly have people who come in and say, oh, your building, it looks so new, it smells so nice. We get a lot of compliments that go straight to Buck for all of the work he does here in the visitor center. Currently, we have 3 interns. Some years we have many more. We have 1 Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funded equipment operator. And then we also in the building have a zone biologist, and he works in for refuges in Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and helps write plans, look at the work they have going on, and helps us manage more in a landscape approach than just looking at only our refuge. And 2 staff people that I didn't list because they don't work for the refuge. They work for the Friends group are Amy Arndt and Julia Hinka. And some of you might be more familiar with them than you are anyone here on the refuge staff because of their amazing work they do reaching out to everyone. And our interns wouldn't be possible without the Friends group. So much of what we do would not happen if it weren't for them. So I would be remiss in not mentioning them and the board and all of their volunteers and all of the members and the people who give so generously of their donations to make so many things happen. The refuge has really blossomed just because the Friends group works so hard to do what they do. So clearly I'm a big fan. All right, so here's the part where I will happily answer your questions. Anything, I threw some out. We have some of these other properties. I'm willing to talk about hunting. I'm willing to talk about why some areas are closed. It's not because we're mean, I promise. And just whatever you ask. There's some things I can't answer. One of those is, about, I can help you understand the difference between our properties and state properties, but I can't explain why they do what they do because I'm not them and I'm not going to speak for them. But we do have some great neighbors and partners, and we all try to work together. So I will stop sharing for now.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, just press your space bar to speak to Rebecca and ask a question. I have a burning question on my tongue, so I'll wait a moment or two to see if anybody wants to jump in first. Okay, Rebecca, of the 4 things that you just showed us in the little squares, the one that jumps out at me is the satellite properties. Do you have a graphic that shows where they are? Maybe on that big slide you showed us of the complex?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I should have pulled one up before I started.
No problem. Maybe you could just tell us where they are. Maybe many of the participants are familiar with, Northwest Ohio to the point where if you name a town, they'll recognize it. So
there are 2 on the in the Catawba Island area. One is the Nells Memorial Nature Preserve, which is owned by Black Swamp Conservancy, but we have partnered together to manage that one. It has a fully accessible kayak launch, a trail through a parking lot. Oh, thank you, Paul. He's so smart. He put the map on the Friends group. I was thinking, oh, I'd have to dig through the files to get our map. And
Now can you bring it up?
yeah, let me share my screen again. There we go. So one thing I'll confess, sometimes the Friends group can share things on their website that I can't because of limitations of being the government. So sometimes it's a lot easier to find things on their site than it is on ours. So if you can't find it on ours, go to theirs. I bet they have it. So we have, we're over at Catawba. Here's East Harbor State Park. And we have Nells, and then we have West Harbor Landing, which is a small fishing access, and it's just a beautiful little spot. You can launch a kayak there. It's a little more less developed than the one at Nells. We see a lot of people just there enjoying their lunches, but it's also a great way to view the birds out in West Harbor. And then we have, this one is still being developed. It's right on the lake shore in Port Clinton. We have the Darby Unit, which is, we've taken tours there occasionally. It is not developed enough to regularly let people in. The dikes there really are not in the shape that they are here. So, but that one is, dates all the way back to the 60s or the 70s. We have this because Davis Bessie, or Toledo Edison, or whoever the company was at the time, purchased this to put the nuclear power plant, but it didn't work. The geology wasn't right. So we had purchased the Navarre Marsh, and we did a land swap, and they gave us this. We gave them Navarre, and then in exchange, we get to manage Navarre. And here is Marinewood. It is just on 163 east or west of Route 2. And it's an old golf course. We're working on developing it. Right now, it's just a grass trail. It's a pretty lovely place, some nice grassland area. Here is the Two Rivers Unit, and we are purchasing more property next to it. These are almost connected. This is all Two Rivers. Turkey Run is down here on the Little Portage. This is a little area that is really just the wet area next to the river right now. That's the Little Portage. And we're working on figuring out what more we can do with that. Then north of Oak Harbor, Navarre, this is a little tract that we had intended to be good for shorebirds, but the water isn't working right, and we're working on what to do with it. It's visible from Route 2, but not open. Here is another area that just has lots of nice habitat, nothing, it's not open to the public. This one you can see from the road. We do take tours there occasionally. This was our first osprey nest location. It's Blousy, and that is the one that has the fish ladder and a pretty cool water structure. There we go, zoom. Here is the I always get my two saints mixed up. I zoomed in too much. The upper Two Saint, and it's right there in limestone and on the river, and it's open to the public. There's not a lot to do there yet. Pretty much just some nice bird watching. There have been a lot of red-headed woodpeckers that use the woods along the river there. They did a large tree planting. Here's the middle Two Saint, has a nice trail along along the river, and then trying to remember what else is there. A kayak launch, some more tree planting in a large upland area. The Turtle Creek access, Turtle Creek Island, and it's really just a small parking area and a way to access that creek. And then the Boss Unit is one of my very favorite areas, and it's seen some nice shorebird use this spring. A small deck is there just to keep your feet dry, basically, so that you can look out across a very flat, shallow area that brings in a lot of waterfowl and shorebirds. The Fox Unit is one of the newest ones. It's just being developed. We're going to see some construction on a trail there this summer. That one was completely made possible by the Friends Group. They purchased that property, or half of it, and have gotten funding to put the trail and everything in there. I might have missed one somewhere, but that's a lot of what's out there.
Rebecca, participant Kim says, do you and your team have a partnership with the new Howard Marsh?
We don't. It's being developed through a large partnership that involves Ducks Unlimited, lots of funding from other places. And other than the fact that we all, kind of talk together and, we know what people are doing there, they have very capable wetland managers, and I don't know anybody who knows more about managing people and doing programming and things than the Toledo Metro Parks. So they kind of do their own thing, and we do ours. And
okay, thanks, Rebecca. Rick says, why is the corner at Estuary Avenue and Trumpeter Trail always closed?
Whoops. I clicked something and now I don't know how to get out of it. There. Corner of Estuary Avenue and Trumpeter Trail. So, okay, I know what you mean. Let me.
I presume that's somewhere in the main.
It is here. Let me. So right here, right?
Can you give us a reference as to where that is?
Sorry.
There you go, by Metzger, okay.
Yep. All right, so this is the Wildlife Drive. And for mostly people management reasons, we need people to keep moving on the Wildlife Drive. And you can park and you can stay a while in areas that have enough room, but we, for safety is the biggest one. We can't have people park and walk. Back when we first opened the Wildlife Drive, and it was only open a couple days a year, we would find cars and we're like, it's been sitting here for 2 hours. and we had no idea where the people are. So that kind of led, as we expanded and more, we're like, it needs to move. So this area is very snug, and in the spring, it's one of the best areas on the refuge for songbirds, warblers. It has the same effect that you're going to see over at McGee on the boardwalk or at the parking lot by the Metzger Marsh area. But there's nowhere to park. And if you get too far over on dikes, we've had cars that had to, we had to get tow trucks out here because if they had moved, they would have rolled over down into the marsh. So we just can't have cars parked in this area. This is, sorry, I'll zoom back out a little bit. If you park at Metzger, you can walk the full length of this dike out to the mouth of Crane Creek. And it is a hiking trail. So wouldn't it be great if people could park here and just walk this part, because it would make life so much easier and simpler, and you wouldn't have to walk, this full mile to get to here. But we just can't do it. What do we say? The first 2 people who can park here, who get here, get to walk it, and the rest don't because there's nowhere else to park. So that is the reason. It's simply because there's nowhere to park.
Participant Paul notes that area is a very, very long walk from Metzger Woodlot.
Very.
That's true, Paul.
And hot and boring.
Okay, well, thanks for that discussion, Rebecca.
Yes.
We've got a few minutes left. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would indulge me, I want to talk a little bit about the Friends group, since you've so generously given us your time. The Friends of Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge is the fundraising arm of the refuge. And what we do is go fundraise to do all the wonderful things that Rebecca touched on, such as acquiring, restoring land, engaging the community, enhancing public access to our satellite sites. I want to give you an example. Rebecca noted that the Nells Preserve, which is on Catawba Island, has a new ADA accessible kayak launch. What I do on the board, my favorite thing as a board member is seeking grants from small family foundations in Ohio. And we got a couple of grants from small family foundations for that project. That project was funded exclusively through grant money late last year, earlier this year, something like $80,000 to build that ADA accessible kayak launch. And we're very proud of that. I'm proud of it because I was directly involved. Many of our board members do their own thing in terms of fundraising. Some make baskets for raffles, and some recruit members and all sorts of things according to their interest. But what I also wanted to tell you is Rebecca showed us a slide earlier on in her presentation about the staff at the refuge, and there were like 10 people there, 10 names, right? Well, the National Wildlife Refuge system in the United States is one of 4 federally funded agencies, and we share the money and land on this continent. It comes from the federal government, but the National Wildlife Refuge system is the least funded and staffed than all the other agencies, which are like the National Park System, the National Forest System, the Bureau of Land Management. But we're doing the best we can with what we have, and Rebecca can attest to that. But you, ladies and gentlemen, can help us by becoming a friend of Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge, and your dues will help us fund our projects. You can also come to the refuge and volunteer to serve at the refuge or at the Visitors Center. And during the biggest week in American birding, which is roughly between May 5th through May 20th, we're going to have a lot of activities going on. McGee Marsh nearby is where the big birding boardwalk occurs, but on the refuge itself, we have many birding hotspots. And we invite you to come to the visitor center, and we'd like to meet with you, give you a pamphlet to show you how to become a member and learn more about things about what we're doing. And lastly, I want to put in a pitch for what you're doing right now, which is participating in our virtual education program. We started this last year by hosting these virtual education programs. This year, we're doing 1 to 2 a month on Thursdays, which is the most popular night based on last year's experience, and also on Saturday mornings like today. We've got people scheduled between now and October on Thursdays and Saturdays. Our next program is on May 5th, Thursday, May 5th. And a man named Eugene Bragg is going to present and talk about Lake Erie aquatics. So if you're interested in fish, that is the program to attend, May 5th at 7 p.m. Just go on our website and register, and you'll be able to learn about that subject. So that's all I've got. Rebecca is saying, let's see, they will purchase it as soon as they have enough money. What's that, Rebecca?
Someone had asked about the shuttle that the current fundraiser is working towards.
Yeah.
And yes, so I know someone gave a donation, a previous board member and president actually gave a donation the other day. And he gave it in honor of the first president and also another former board member, Bill Daly, who had raised the funds for the first shuttle, which just, mechanical items only last so long. So it had just fully lived its life. And, but so many donations have been pouring in. It obviously is something that other people have missed as much as we've missed offering this opportunity. So, yep, as soon as the money's in, we'll get that up and running, and we will discuss how we're going to do reservations. And Paul asked, which areas are planned for shorebirds this year? Unfortunately, one of them is MS3, which is the west of those 3 big ones that are between County Line Road and Wheeler Road. It's the one to the west and has the highest dike banks. So it's a little tricky to see into that one. Boss Unit, we're anticipating it being just getting better and better every day for shorebirds. And I did have to, I laugh at myself a lot if nobody knew that. Our biologist was out in the morning and saw one avocet. I know there were some at Maumee Bay last week, but he had one avocet in Crane Creek. He's like on the mud flats south of a certain parking lot. Well, I had to go out and open gates and things after work. So I drove through, but the east wind came up and brought all the lake up into the refuge with it. So there were no mud flats when I made it out there. So I didn't get to see the avocet. But I'm trying to remember, there's one more that's going to be down. I'll find out. And otter sightings. I don't know if you know this, Paul, but staff don't get to see otters on the refuge. So it probably would have been, I think Tony got a glimpse of one last week, I think. He's one of our volunteers. He comes out and does some photography. And I think that was the last one I saw. I do want to put a plug in for all of our visitor safety. If you're coming to the area this summer or spring, we're seeing an uptick in wood ticks and the diseases that they carry. So please be tick aware and tick safe. And, you know, gotta look like a goofball and tuck your pants into your socks and spray whatever you need to spray, and do your tick checks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've come to the top of the hour, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there with Rebecca and me to learn about the refuge. And I hope to see you on future programs. I wish you all the best. Hope to see you at the biggest week in American birding somewhere out there. So I wish you all a good day, and I thank you for attending. We'll sign off now. Bye-bye now.